Hey, where's all right? Meron tayong live?
Today, I want to tell you 3 stories from my life. That's it. No big deal. Just 3 stories. The first story is about connecting the dots. I dropped out of Reed College after the first 6 months, but then stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit. So why'd I drop out? It started before I was born. My biological mother was a young, unwed graduate student, and she decided to put me up for adoption. She felt very strongly that I should be adopted by college graduates, so everything was all set for me to be adopted at birth by a lawyer and his wife. Except that when I popped out, they decided at the last minute that they really wanted a girl. So my parents, who were on a waiting list, got a call in the middle of the night asking, "We've got an unexpected baby boy. Do you want him?" They said, "Of course." My biological mother found out later that my mother had never graduated from college and that my father had never graduated from high school. She refused to sign the final adoption papers. She only relented a few months later when my parents promised that I would go to college. This was the start in my life.
I think that I think it's also parang oh, it's a good showing that education we shouldn't have parang prejudice against people na who weren't given proper education or didn't have the privilege to have a proper education. I think we should give people a chance. For example, yung mga parents si Steve Jobs na yung biological parent ni Steve Jobs, yung mother niya, ayaw bigyan sa mga parents ni Steve Jobs currently dahil they were not given they did not have the proper privilege of uh, going to college and going to high school. Pero because she gave the chance to 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 the parents of Steve Jobs, uh, we we were we were given the chance to have who we know as Steve Jobs today. He is who he is now because sa mga parents niya to his adopt adoptive parents. So I think like we shouldn't have prejudice against mga people who were not given proper education or think them as lower, you know. Yeah, Violet.
Uh, my opinion lang is, ano, it is not about how rich you are. It is about the knowledge you have and the skills you have that will make your own great legacy and your own future. Yun lang. Lorenzo, ikaw naman. Let's go.
For me, education doesn't really matter if uh, I mean it matters, but but once you really enjoyed or understand on what you only need, I mean the knowledge you only need, it can really help you a lot.
And 17 years later, I did go to college. But I naively chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford. And all of my working class parents' savings were being spent on my college tuition. After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was, spending all the money my parents had saved their entire life. So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay. It was pretty scary at the time.
Yeah, I think that's true. Now there are some things in I know there are things in and there are limitations. There are limitations in education. For example, sorry. I think nag-echo ba ako? Sorry, let me continue. Kala ko nag-echo ako. Uh, on what I was trying to say was, I think education has limitations. For example, Steve Jobs, parents, I think it's a good thing to look back. They were not giving proper education, pero they turned out to be good enough parents. You could even say now great that they raised Steve Jobs with a good mindset, and they really gave effort to give him proper college, even though they themselves don't have the privilege to have, So, and that's something that, well, obviously they did not learn from academic uh, experience because they didn't really have enough academic experience to learn about that. So yeah. Ikaw, Kyle.
Uh, hmm, uh, School does not always have the key to solve your problems in your future self or future lives, but some school works does use does be helpful in your future lives when things are getting out of hand or in a rough situation.
Yeah, I totally agree with Brian. School does not give the us, I mean, school does not give us the good time or wait, sorry, my internet's lagging.
Time, but looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
Okay, class, who would like to do problem 3 on the board?
The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and begin dropping in on the ones that looked far more interesting. It wasn't all romantic. I didn't have a dorm room, so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food with. And I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. I loved it. And much of what I stumbled into by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on. Let me give you one example. Reed College at that time offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country. Throughout the campus, every poster, every label on every drawer was beautifully hand calligraphed. Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take the normal classes, I decided to take a calligraphy class to learn how to do this. I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations, about what makes great typography great. It was beautiful, historical, artistically subtle in a way that science can't capture, and I found it fascinating. None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life. But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. And we designed it all into the Mac. It was the first computer with beautiful typography. If I had never dropped in on that single course in college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have them. If I had never dropped out, I would have never dropped in on that calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do. Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust.
Also, a nice perspective then to look in, or what Steve Jobs says is also parang when you're overwhelmed na taking a step back and looking at what you're doing is also a good thing. For example, him dropping out and taking a break and dropping into different classes na hindi niya talaga oh, gusto. It was a spontaneous and thing to do, and it was also more of a his what's this called, intuition. It's more of his gut feeling that he should do this. I think you should have confidence on that too. Taking a step back and realizing to take it slow sometimes. Yeah. Ikaw, Viran or Lorenzo, ano masasabi niyo?
Um, my opinion on this, parang kay Sir lang, pag kung ano yung gagawin mo ngayon this this previous lives ngayon, like nasa school ka pa, it will take a big effect on your future lives when you have a job, family, or a house on your own. It will take a really big step up on your future self.
For me, it takes a big impact on what you've learned from the past because you can use those on today or future days. Well, some educations doesn't really matter if you learn a lot from them, like math, like uh more math stuff. Like it doesn't really apply in real life. Actually, only half of the math that you've used can be really used in real life.
Yes.
Well, I have none, so yes, I agree with Sar.
Me too. I agree with Sai. Future is unpredictable.
That the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well worn path. And that will make all the difference.
No matter how hard it is, keep moving forward.
Oh, sorry.
No matter how hard the situation is, always solve it as you can. And if you can't solve the situation, find a friend or find someone that can help you to solve that very hard situation or very hard challenges.
I think like you should always expect challenges, always be prepared to fail, always expect the worst and hope for the best is a thing that we should always be prepared for. And even people like Steve Jobs face this, so I think we should accept. I think we should accept failure, and the important thing is to always march forward.